Kings Island is one of America's best amusement parks. Located about 25 minutes from downtown Cincinnati and 40 minutes from the CVG airport is a 364-acre amusement park home to 15 roller coasters and dozens of attractions for families and thrill seekers alike. They opened their doors in 1972 in the town of Mason, Ohio. The name Kings Island comes from the local township Kings Mills and then the nearby amusement park Coney Island, which unfortunately has since closed. But it was established as a family destination with that iconic Eiffel Tower standing in the center of the park over 300 feet in the air. There's so much charm and personality, and I feel like the park has only gotten better over the past several years. I made my first visit to Kings Island in 2015, and over the past 10 years, it's been amazing to see their growth. In this review, I'm going to dive into everything you need to know about Kings Island. We'll talk about the different areas of the park, their various rides and attractions, different tips for your visit, and everything in between. Now, one of the first things I want to mention is just how accessible Kings Island is, because it really is in a perfect location. You're just over an hour away from Columbus, 2 hours from Louisville, 2 hours from Indianapolis. The actual town of Mason is really nice. There's tons of hotels and restaurants. There's literally a Great Wolf Lodge next door. This is set up to be a destination for the Midwest, and especially when you're pulling from towns like Columbus and Indianapolis that don't have an amusement park of their own, this is an ideal day trip or even something you could make a weekend out of. And I feel like more so than other amusement parks I've visited, Kings Island is designed to be something that is repeatable. They're always adding something new, and the guest experience is just so positive that it'll lead you wanting to come back. For me, my year is not complete without a visit to Kings Island. It is so well run, and it just leaves me with a smile on my face. I just feel good being at Kings Island, and that's how an amusement park should feel. So let's talk about what makes Kings Island so good, and I want to do that by walking through the layout. Kings Island has a very wide and spacious front gate. It means there are tons of turnstiles, and consistently, all of them are open, they are well staffed, you don't have to wait in a long line to get into the park, even at its most busiest days. Unfortunately, the actual entrance building is a little ugly in my opinion. The problem is what you're seeing is actually the backside of a restaurant. It's only used for like special events, which I'm sure is a great dining experience. But why keep something for the few when the many just experience a big brown rectangular box with whatever ad is plastered on it for what's new that year? Which, okay, better than nothing. But I just feel like it's not up to the same standard as what's been set with the rest of the park. Look at what Carowinds did in 2015 with their new entrance. Or Worlds of Fun's. Theirs looks awesome. Kings Island can and should do better. But luckily, once you scan into the park, you are greeted with International Street, which is just amazing. You have that perfect view with the sign, the Eiffel Tower directly ahead, dozens of fountains lined up down the center that dance in different formations and shapes, beautiful buildings on either side, cobblestone, and it's so wide open. You can look out and see the other end, which is a big difference from Kings Dominion. That's Kings Island's sister park just north of Richmond, Virginia, and that's a very different International Street experience. Same concept with the fountains and the Eiffel Tower, but they have a ton of trees that block the view. That's great for shade, and granted, Kings Island does have a bit of a shade issue. As nice as these pathways are, if you go on a hot day, you might find yourself at times struggling to get under cover. I actually grew up going to Kings Dominion. That was my home park as a kid. So when I first made my visit to Kings Island, I got a weird sense of deja vu. You go to one place for so long and then you end up at a similar but not quite the same location. It's bizarre. But I've learned to appreciate both takes on the same concept. One way that Kings Island does International Street infinitely better than Kings Dominion is the fact that you have so many different pathways splitting off into different areas. It is not a funnel that leads straight to the Eiffel Tower and then splits off from there, which is what happens at Kings Dominion. In the mornings when everyone is entering and in the evenings when everyone is leaving, it's just a mass group of people because that's your only way in and out. At Kings Island, if you want, you can immediately turn left to go into Action Zone right after you go through the turnstiles. And that also means sometimes it is convenient to get from one area of the park to another by crossing through International Street. That is rarely the case at Kings Dominion. So already, Kings Island has amazing guest flow. A couple of points of interest on International Street. Grain & Grill is the first restaurant you'll arrive at. Kings Island has amazing food, and Grain & Grill specifically is home to some of the healthiest options in the park. It actually replaced a Skyline Chili. There were two in Kings Island, so the other one is still there. There's also a ton of nice gift shops up front. I've always thought that Kings Island had some of the best merch of any park in the world. Roller coaster cutouts and nanos, stickers, everything is there. And clearly they're popular with guests too, because I consistently see people in Kings Island shirts as I travel across the country. So let's exit International Street and go clockwise around the park. So we'll take a left, you'll walk past the Kings Island Theater. For their 50th anniversary, they had an awesome show called Phantom Theater Encore. It ran for 2 seasons and was a great way to pay homage to a past attraction called Phantom Theater. It was a really old dark ride that unfortunately I never got the opportunity to experience, but I know it fills a lot of people with nostalgia, and I think that's one thing that Kings Island does very well, is they play into that nostalgia and that love that people have for Kings Island. They have a very passionate fan base, people who have been coming here for years and years and years. So let's talk about Action Zone. And it's actually kind of a bummer that we're starting with here first, because in my opinion, this is actually the least interesting section of the park, because it's pretty much just a mishmash of different rides without any cohesion. You have Invertigo on the left-hand side. That is the Vekoma Invertigo model, the only one left operating in the United States. It's a very intense ride, not for everyone, and one of those roller coasters that if it doesn't have a long line, it's probably for a reason. I could definitely see this being the next big roller coaster to close, especially since it's so close to the front entrance. That might be a great way to do like a gatekeeper style entrance. Not necessarily with a wing coaster, but just something to cross over that front gate could look really cool. Also in Action Zone is a Shoot the Chutes with a double down drop, one of only 2 Intamin gyro drop towers in the US, the other being the drop tower at King's Dominion. If you've done one, it's still worth doing the other because this one actually rotates on the way up. Freakishly tall, one of several rides in the park that goes over 300 feet. Across is another popular flat ride, Delirium. This is the sister attraction to Max Air at Cedar Point, one of those massive frisbees by Huss, and it sits directly next to Banshee, a B&M invert. This is a ride that opened in 2014, replacing the infamous Son of Beast. That is one attraction that I definitely did not have the opportunity to experience, and frankly, it sounds like I dodged a bullet. It still blows my mind that a ride like that used to exist here, but I really love what Kings Island did here by placing a gravestone in the Banshee queue to honor that fallen ride. And last but not least, we have a sky coaster directly in the center that has an upcharge attraction, and just behind it is the Bat. This is Kings Island's hidden gem. No, like quite literally hidden gem. I wonder how many people come to this park and don't even realize that this thing's here. The walk back to the entrance is so long, it's no wonder it rarely ever gets a long line. I don't mean this to be mean, but it's just kind of forgettable, which is a shame because I actually really do enjoy the experience, but I always forget it's here. I think something they could do to improve that is push the entrance back a bit so you can create more of a plaza out of that space. You could even add a flat ride or another roller coaster back there to go behind Banshee. That way you can have the Action Zone pathways just be a little larger. And while they're at it, they should consider retheming the area. The former Cedar Fair group has done a really nice job re-theming different areas to tie everything together. They did this with the land next door, Adventure Port. It's one of the smaller regions of this park, almost like a mini land. They're just home to 3 rides, Cargo Loco, Soul Spin, and Adventure Express. But it looks so nice with, of course, a ton of Spanish inspiration. Adventure Express is one of those rides that I love to do, and I don't want to visit Kings Island without riding it. But it also used to have kind of a crappy entrance, and it just looks so much nicer now. That's why I really hope that they redo the entrance to the Bat. And if they want a retheme while they're at it, I feel like some sort of spooky horror vibe would work. That way you could tie in the Bat and Banshee and then just retheme the Drop Tower and Delirium, and hopefully by then Invertigo's gone. Adjacent to Action Zone and Adventure Port is Oktoberfest, another very small land. To be honest, there's not really a whole lot to cover here. They have Viking Fury, which is their swinging ship, and then the Fest House, which is a large indoor seating area. By far the best place to go if you need to take cover from the rain or just need some AC. And inside is a Panda Express, which yes, is included on the dining plan, which is very nice. And from here, we can move on into Coney Mall. And I'm not gonna lie, this land is a little generic, but it's really nice, so I'm okay with it. It's essentially one long midway, very classic Americana. Tons of old school style amusement rides here, such as a wave swinger, a monster, a scrambler, you have antique cars. And then your big roller coaster that runs the entire length of the land is the Racer. Kings Island has several wooden roller coasters, and this is one of their most significant. It is a pair of racing coasters that stay alongside each other the whole time. Tons of airtime hills, just good fun. Especially over the past couple of years, they've done a really nice job taking care of it. The Gravity Group came in and put on their pre-cut track. It makes it ultra smooth. I feel like the Racer is running the best I've ever seen it. In terms of food, their 2 main locations are Coney Barbecue and then Skyline Chili, which I mentioned earlier. If you are not from the Cincinnati area and you have not had Skyline Chili, I encourage you to use this opportunity to try it. My personal favorite is the 4-way. And from Coney Mall, we'll then take a left-hand turn into our next mini land, Area 72. This is the dead-end plaza home to just 2 attractions, but they're 2 significant rides. Our first is Flight of Fear. This is the ride that caused the inspiration for a very paranormal space theme like Discoveryland. It's an indoor premier ride spaghetti bowl launch coaster. A lot of fun with a great queue as you board an alien spaceship. There's even a pre-show with different characters talking about the situation at hand. And then next door is the park's tallest, fastest, and longest steel coaster, Orion. This opened in 2020, replacing the Firehawk Vekoma Flying Dutchman coaster. That was a ride I experienced actually many times. I didn't hate it, I thought it was pretty cool, but Orion is a lot better. It was originally designed for California's Great America, but due to high earthquake expenses, the cost of steel, and other factors, they decided against putting it at California's Great America, and so they moved it to Kings Island. And it's a really nice addition. Prior to this, people were saying for years and years that Kings Island needed a Giga coaster. It's certainly not the best. I would still give that to Fury or Intimidator 305, but for what it is, it's really fast. It's got a great drop. It's just a little short, but I will give Kings Island props. They did a nice job theming up this ride, as well as some of the other attractions in the park, such as Mystic Timbers. In the case of both of those rides, they actually reached out to IMAscore to give them custom soundtracks. You can hear them in the queue and as you're waiting in the plaza. It is awesome. That is a level of detail I can appreciate. So let's exit Area 72 and continue clockwise around the park. And to do this, we have to walk past a section of park that is very much a dead zone at the moment. In between Coney Mall and Rivertown is a long, narrow pathway that bumps up against where Vortex used to sit. This was a massive aero looping coaster that operated for years and years and years, eventually closing for good in 2019. Here we are several years later, and there's still not a new attraction there. They do use this site to launch their drones for their nighttime spectacular. I'll talk about that a bit later. Kings Island has a ton of roller coasters, but there's still some gaps they could fill. My top choices would be a Mach Rides Extreme Spinning Coaster, an RMC iBox coaster, maybe an S&S Axis, or something from Vekoma like one of their launch coasters or even a tilt coaster. All those would fill some sort of gap that Kings Island has in their lineup. They don't have a spinning coaster. They don't have any sort of fourth dimension ride. I'd love to see an LSM launch coaster, which Kings Island currently does not have. And I think any one of these have the potential to be a headliner. Because the one thing that I'll say about Kings Island's roller coaster lineup is that so many of the roller coasters here are great, like good B+ style attractions. It's the type of park that you go to and you want to ride almost every roller coaster. But how many of them are gonna like blow you away? Right now, I'd say the only one is really Mystic Timbers. I would give that ride an A+. So another A+ roller coaster would be awesome. The issue is, I feel like there is this underlying fear in giving Kings Island a world-class roller coaster because they don't want it to overshadow Cedar Point. Cedar Point is the flagship property 3.5 hours north of here on Lake Erie. They have several A+ roller coasters. They are known as like the roller coaster park. And so when it comes to new additions, it feels like Cedar Point typically gets like the better ride, which is a little odd because honestly, in terms of attendance, it feels like they do similar numbers. And the Cedar Fair group has clearly shown no issue in investing in Kings Island. They usually end up getting a roller coaster like every 3 years or so. Just in the time since I've been coming, they've added 3. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Vortex plot of land, but whatever they build, I hope they're able to tie it in to Backlot Stunt Coaster and then give this its own mini land re-theme treatment. I think there's a lot of potential. So let's talk about Rivertown. This is the park's Western theme, if you will, loosely at least. They house 3 of the park's biggest and most iconic roller coasters, the Beast, Mystic Timbers, and Diamondback. The Beast has its own dedicated pathway with footprints leading directly to the entrance. You can really only see the lift hill from in the park. The rest of it takes place through the woods. It is a legendary experience. Dates all the way back to 1979. It was built before computers were really a thing. They just made up the layout as they went and they did a great job. Yeah, there's a lot of trim breaks, but it's such an iconic experience. To this day, it is still the world's longest wooden roller coaster and is something that you absolutely have to do at night. The Beast might be arguably the most famous night ride in the world because it is so dark back there. It's just one of those experiences you gotta do. But frankly, I would argue that most of the roller coasters here give phenomenal night rides. The Bat, super good at night. Same with Adventure Express, it's so dark back there. Mystic Timbers, amazing at night. Orion, really cool at night because they light up with all these cool colors. And the odds are that you won't be able to experience all of those at night during your one visit, which is a great excuse to come back for more. Next up, Mystic Timbers, which has always been my favorite roller coaster in the park. It's an incredibly smooth, airtime-packed, low-to-the-ground GCI coaster. Passes out over the rapids, which we talk about rides that have a long walk to the entrance. That's another one that takes forever to get there. They don't make it easy for you. I wonder how many people completely miss this attraction because you can't see it from anywhere in the park. Diamondback is a B&M hypercoaster, opened in 2009. Lots of great floater airtime hills, definitely a fan favorite. The other big ride in this section is the train. This will give you some amazing views of Diamondback as well as Mystic Timbers. It's designed to be a relaxing experience, but it's also a mode of transportation. Kings Island is not just an amusement park, it also has its own dedicated water park, Soak City. And the train will take you directly there from inside the park. Otherwise, if you want to visit Soak City, you can use its own separate entrance over on the far right side past the main entrance of Kings Island. There's a bunch of great water slides in there. I've only visited once, so I'm not really going to talk about it in this video, but I know they are adding dueling water coasters for 2025, so that's super exciting. Maybe that'll get me back there. But I've always enjoyed the train ride around Kings Island, even if I'm not getting off at the Soak City stop. And there used to be another ride directly next to that Rivertown train station. It was called Tomb Raider, or the Crypt. This is a massive, completely indoor Huss topspin that unfortunately has been closed for many years. But the building still stands. Recently it's been home to a haunt maze, so it's nice that they are able to find some use for it, but I'd love to see a more permanent ride fill this building, because it's just too big to be used for nothing. Before we move on to our last land, one more thing that I'll mention about Rivertown. Miami River Brew House across from Mystic Timbers has my favorite food in the park. There's tons of options on the dining plan as indoor seating. It's a really nice atmosphere. I recommend the pub burger. Which brings us into Camp Snoopy, but also Planet Snoopy. This is essentially one big kids area that got split in two. The front half remains Planet Snoopy, and now the back half is Camp Snoopy with this overall wilderness theme. The Camp Snoopy side of things is definitely a lot nicer than the original. I'd love to see parts of Planet Snoopy get updated as well. But there's tons of rides for the kids, including multiple roller coasters. You have the Great Pumpkin Coaster, which is the smallest roller coaster in the park. Woodstock Express, previously known as Beastie, which is like the cutest name ever. I wish they'd bring that back. Woodstock's Air Rail is a Vekoma Hang and Bang. And then next door, Snoopy's Soapbox Racers. As of when this video is being made, is the newest roller coaster in the park, a Vekoma Family Boomerang, which is a lot of fun. The other major ride of significance I would say in this area is Boo Blasters. It's the park's only dark ride. You can find several of these across the Cedar Fair chain, but in my opinion, this is the weakest one. It's a different ride system from all the others, almost more Haunted Mansion style, but I've always found it to be frustrating because you can't see where you're aiming your blaster at, so it's hard to get an indicator whether or not you're actually getting points, so I tend to prefer one of the others. And aside from that, there are two important food locations that we gotta highlight. First off, it's in this land where you can get Kings Island's blue ice cream. This is a signature product, and yes, it is very good. And then right at the very front, near the Eiffel Tower, is Tom and Chi. This is my second favorite food location in the park. It's essentially gourmet grilled cheeses. They have some options on the dining plan. I highly recommend the barbecue bacon. It is just incredible. The food got to be so popular that they gave it an upgraded location. It used to be in a small stand by Diamondback, but they've since moved it to the old Chick-fil-A location. Highly recommend. So that gives you an idea of what it's like to visit Kings Island during the day. I touched on the nighttime experience a bit with some of the specific roller coasters, but I've always thought that Kings Island also just came alive at night. They have some really nice lighting effects, and each year they do a different nighttime spectacular. It feels like Disney or Universal quality. There's fireworks, lights, fountains, drones, and all of it's in sync with music. It is awesome. And the best viewing area for that is, of course, at the front of the park. But be aware, this show can impact your nighttime riding experience. Rides like the Beast and Orion close 20 minutes before the nighttime spectacular and then reopen after the show has concluded, after they've inspected to make sure that no fireworks got on the track. So that means if you want last ride of the night on the Beast, which is a very popular tradition, you're gonna have to sit through all that downtime, which is not ideal, but safety first, I get it. It's just something to be aware of. So, if it hasn't become blatantly obvious, Kings Island is an amazing park. A lot of people say it's the best of the Cedar Fair parks, and I can definitely understand why. It's pretty much either this or Cedar Point, and I feel like this park is way more homey. And frankly, it's hassle-free. Everything's always open. I don't have to stress while I'm here. If the lines are long, it's because it's genuinely crowded and not because they have slow operations or only running one train on something. The only coasters that run one train are the ones that can only operate with one train, such as in Vertigo or Snoopy's. It just feels like this park is always well staffed. You know, a lot of amusement parks across the US have problems finding employees. And it doesn't feel like Kings Island is that way at all. People get excited to work here, and it's because they have a lot of home park pride. It's become an icon for an area, and people genuinely love the park. I feel like so many coaster enthusiasts are born because they grow up going to Kings Island, as well as having Cedar Point not too far away. I find that most people who have been to Kings Island have also been to Cedar Point. And interestingly enough, I would say most people who I talk to at the park have been before. I feel like it's rare that I ever meet someone where it's their first time visiting Kings Island. Like, I know that everyone has their first at some point, but the point is that there's so much repeatability. People keep coming back. It's a great place to go during the summer, and it's also a must visit for Haunt and Winterfest. I've been to their Halloween event several times, and they really have some great houses and awesome scare zones. And I recently visited their Winterfest for the first time, and I've been going to the one at King's Dominion since day one. And I feel like Kings Island's kicked it up a notch even from King's Dominion. The lights were amazing, there were tons of shows, they had ice slides, ice sculptors, and they even kept Mystic Timbers and Flight of Fear open. They called Flight of Fear Flight of Cheer, and that's just amazing. So as far as amusement parks go, Kings Island is a gold standard. Other parks could learn a lot by looking at the things that Kings Island does. So if you haven't had the opportunity to visit, I cannot recommend it enough. So let me know down in the comments below what you think of Kings Island in Mason, Ohio. If you agree with the points that I brought up, and if you think there's anything I missed, be sure to post that down below. And of course, stay tuned for more here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.